Hi, everyone. We are an organizational behavior consulting firm, and today we'll be analyzing the movie The Devil Wears Prada by observing and analyzing the work environment and giving suggestions on how to better improve those work environments. So I'm Selena.
I'm Lauren.
And I'm Iman.
And we're going to get started with the table of contents. So first we're going to do a movie summary, and then we're going to jump into 3 scenes where we will analyze the scenes and just give our feedback and also recommendations.
I'll start with the movie plot summary. Could you go to the next slide, please, Selena? Thank you. So in this film, basically, it follows a girl named Andy who has dreams of becoming a journalist one day, and she has the opportunity to kickstart her career when she gets a position at a fashion firm called Runway. And it's a pretty prominent fashion firm, so she's very excited about it. But she quickly learns that that she is very easily replaceable in the fashion industry, and if she wants to keep her position at Runway, she'll need to work harder than anyone else. And unfortunately, as a result, Andy has to satisfy her particularly difficult boss, Miranda. And so she finds herself like changing her behavior, attire, and other things in order to please her and other employees that she has. And as she adapts to this new work environment, she begins to see herself changing, and it negatively impacts a lot of her relationships, including her relationship with her friends and her significant other. And it leads to her losing sight of who she really is and what she cares about.
Okay, I'm going to be going over the characters in this film. So one of the first characters is Miranda, and she is the head boss of Runway who Andy has to work with. And she basically creates challenges in the work environment and has very high expectations from her employees that in the past have caused many assistants to quit. Then we have Andy, or Andrea, who is the newest employee at Runway, who has no idea, barely knows anything about the fashion industry compared to everyone else she's working with. And she has to adapt to this new environment of all these high-end people with all their special like attire on and all their high expectations. And if she wants to keep her position, she has to keep up with everyone else in her business, or with everyone else in the company she works with. Then we have Nigel, who has been working there for a very long time, and he has great expertise, yet he has little acknowledgement of his value and successes and just how valuable of a person he is and to the company. Then we have Emily. She is Andy's coworker who tends to give her a lot of sass and attitude throughout the movie, and she's very competitive as she wants to be the highest and the best for Miranda and to always have all the special opportunities. And she's quite harsh on her, especially at the beginning, and she just acts like she runs the whole thing. But she slowly starts to warm up to Andy, and they start to create a friendship between them. Then we have Nate, who is Andy's significant other, who she clashes with at some points due to her changing behavior and her priorities, that she's no longer the Andy that they all knew because of this job that she's taken on. And finally, we have Serena, who's another one of Andy's coworkers at Runway, and she's just a friend of Emily's.
So the first scene that we will be analyzing is Andy's first day as Miranda's second assistant. So the first concept that I analyzed was the attitudes that Miranda and Andy had towards their work environment. So attitudes are clusters of beliefs, feelings, and behavioral intentions towards a person, object or event. Miranda displays a negative attitude towards her employees, which limits them from performing their full potential. She uses intimidation as a way to establish fear, power, respect, and control. Miranda speaks in short commands and rarely does eye contact, uses condescending tone with all her employees, regardless of their status and seniority in the company. Miranda's hostile attitude towards her employees is demonstrated when Andy asks her a follow-up question and about Miranda's instructions, and she answers her with, "Please bore someone else with your questions." This demonstrates how Miranda's attitude restricted Andy's effectiveness to accomplish her task by not supporting her. Andy's attitude towards her job is also displayed in this scene. Andy doesn't know a thing about the fashion industry, and her attitude shows that she doesn't really care to understand and learn about the fashion industry in this scene. This is demonstrated when she smirks and laughs during a meeting when Nigel and Miranda are selecting outfits for their upcoming runway. She thinks that it's foolish that they're trying to decide between two belts that in Andy's eyes are very similar. Miranda asks her if there's something funny, and Andy replies, "It's just that I'm still learning about this stuff," leading Miranda to give her an eye-opening lesson about how Andy thinks that the fashion industry has nothing to do with her, but in reality, her simple blue sweater that she's wearing is also designed by people in that room from a pile of stuff. The next topic is job satisfaction. The second concept that I analyzed, which means a job satisfaction is the person's evaluation of his or her job. Job satisfaction is a reflection of the work environment, emotional experience, and outcomes people deal with at work. Having a positive job satisfaction contributes to higher performance and motivation to complete the organization's objectives. So Emily mistreats Andy through mocking comments like, "Oh, I'm sorry, do you have your prior commitment? Some hideous skirt convention to go to?" These destructive comments caused Andy to evaluate her job as an unproductive environment. Emily's behavior towards Andy could be described as psychological harassment, which refers to as hostile or unwanted conduct, verbal comments, actions, and gestures that weaken an employee's dignity or psychological integrity. Emily treats Andy this way because of her high self-concept as Miranda's first assistant. She points out that she is entitled to 20 minutes of lunch and manages Miranda's schedule and gets to travel with Miranda to Paris, while Andy's job duties are just to get coffee. All these negative encounters towards Andy have led her to have low satisfaction in the work environment and to be miserable during her first day at work. Oops, sorry. Lastly, the last concept that I analyzed was organizational commitment, which refers to an individual's emotional attachment to an organization. Organizational commitment basically indicates an employee's bond with the company that they work for. In this scene, organizational commitment is demonstrated by Andy's commitment to go to her job after having to deal with Miranda's endless demands and her coworkers' rude behavior. For instance, Andy's commitment is displayed by how she showed up every day to work in the fashion industry unqualified, and even put aside her own feelings of how she could not stand the fact that Miranda would throw her coat and her bag on top of her desk every morning as a sign that Andy was inferior to Miranda, as a sign that, Miranda used to show Andy that she was inferior. Andy stayed committed to her job because working for Miranda for at least 1 year would open many job opportunities. But Andy wasn't the only person with organizational commitment. Her coworkers also stayed committed to the company and even used display rules to hide their true emotions every time Miranda would say cruel comments towards them, like, "Why is no one ready?" when they clearly put a lot of effort into their work. They stayed committed to the organization because of the benefits that come along with the job, like traveling to Paris, being a famous designer in the fashion industry, and more. So all these concepts that we analyze, some recommendations that I have are that first, Miranda needs to change her attitude towards her employees by being more considerate of how she is treating them. Miranda can improve her attitude by mastering the levels of emotional intelligence, by being aware of her employees' emotions and managing their emotions by being nicer to them. She needs to support her employees through organizational citizen behaviors, like answering their questions, providing positive feedback, and Andy can also change her attitude by increasing her organizational comprehension to learn and have a clear understanding of what the fashion industry is. Secondly, by providing promotion, salary increasement, bonuses, and overall creating a more positive environment for her employees to have better emotions towards their job will lead to higher job satisfaction. Lastly, although Andy and her coworkers demonstrate organizational commitment, even if Miranda's leadership skills are awful and she uses intimidation to keep her employees around, there are other effective ways to build organizational commitment. Some suggestions are increasing employee involvement and building trust. By Miranda allowing her employees to participate in the decision-making process of creating the fashion runway outfits, the employees will feel a stronger connection to the organization and be more willing to and motivated to participate. Another way to build a deeper commitment to the organization is if Miranda can trust her team to succeed their own tasks, to successfully complete their tasks. This trust can be built on fairness, consideration, and integrity from both Miranda and her employees. According to our textbooks, employees tend to be more effective and hardworking when they feel they can trust, and also when they feel trusted, and also they feel that they could trust their organizational leader. Through these recommendations, Miranda will be a better boss, and the employees will have a stronger commitment and connection with the organization, leading to higher motivation and higher job performance.
Thank you, Selena. Just as a disclaimer, I may cough a few times and I might mute while I cough, but the second scene that I analyzed was a scene in which Nigel believes he's going to be transferred to a top-tier fashion firm under a person named Holt, and he's going to be the new creative director for that firm. But he's shocked when Miranda instead chooses another employee, Jacqueline, for the position that he thought he was going to get. Nigel's immediate response is, "When the time is right, she'll pay me back." To which Andy responds, "Are you sure about that?" And it kind of just really speaks to kind of every, like the environment within Runway that kind of hurts its employees. And so there are a few concepts that stood out to me in this scene, but the first is organizational politics. And as McShane describes it, organizational politics are selfish actions that hurt other individuals within the organization, as well as the organization itself. And in this scene, Miranda sacrifices Nigel's interests in order to keep her position. And as a result of that, she's not only sacrificing Nigel's interests, she's also sacrificing the interests of the organization as a whole, because Nigel is a very important asset to Runway and would be an important asset to any other fashion firm that also functions the same. And she does not feel remorse about it either when Andy confronts her about it. McShane details in the textbook that employees that are caught in between organizational politics often experience, quote, lower job satisfaction, organizational commitment, organizational citizenship, and task performance, as well as higher levels of work-related stress and motivation to leave the organization. And so after reviewing all of the issues that could arise from organizational politics, one recommendation I would make is, in order to reduce organizational politics, is to implement norms and have leadership that foster an apolitical work environment, an environment that encourages its employees to do better and to be rewarded for it. And so implementing values inherent to the organization, such as collective identity, we're all working towards the same goal, and a greater emphasis on selflessness and personal development within an organization, i.e. having some support for my friend Nigel. And the second concept that I noticed was expectancy theory of employee motivation. So now we're looking specifically not so much at Miranda, but at Nigel and his experience. So what's the inherent nature of expectancy theory is that an employee's expectations of extrinsic rewards are based on the behaviors they choose to employ in order to get a specific outcome of that behavior. And In essence, that just means people carry out behaviors and they hope that a result of those behaviors will be a reward that suits them. And so there are three factors to expectancy theory. One is the E to P expectancy, or the effort to performance expectancy, the performance to outcome expectancy, and then the outcome valence. And if any of these three factors are lacking, an employee's motivation goes down. So in this case, Nigel experiences what McShane would call a negative valence because his body language reveals dissatisfaction with the outcome of his performance. And a solution to this, in my opinion, would be implementing individual employee surveys that ask them how they would like to be rewarded in response to their performance. And another thing to note about expectancy theory is that it addresses extrinsic motivation more than it does intrinsic motivation. So I'm speaking purely on the basis of extrinsic motivation, as that would be the reward in this case as well, if Nigel were to be transferred to a top tier fashion firm. And the third concept that I wanted to discuss was Miranda's leadership style. So revisiting Miranda and her behavior again. So Miranda is not a very people-oriented leader. She doesn't really cater to the needs of her employees, and she refrains from creating an environment within which they can prosper. And that's also from our textbook. And so a solution to this, in my opinion, would be for her to take on a better leadership style. And so I wanted to look specifically at path goal leadership theory. And basically, McShane shares that this theory calls for the use of at least one leadership style to impact an employee's behaviors for reaching their work-related goals, and in essence, influence their outcome valences and basically make them more satisfied with their jobs. And it's essentially a method for Miranda to be a better employer and increase organizational effectiveness by giving value to what an organization needs most, which is impeccable human capital. And so my solution to this situation would be for Miranda to look specifically at a supportive and achievement-oriented leadership style within path goal leadership theory. And so supportive leaders are approachable, engage with employees respectfully, and adhere to their work-related or other needs. And achievement-oriented leaders help employees set goals and perform better over time. And so those are the solutions that I think would work in this situation. I'll leave it to Lauren to go over the third scene. Thank you.
Thanks, Iman. So for my scene, I did Andrea's talking to Nigel on how she feels about her job. So at this point in the movie, basically she's very frustrated with how her job is going and that she feels like she can never do anything right. And that no matter what she does, Miranda's always upset at her or has to have her do something else. It makes her feel like she just isn't doing anything right. So she goes into what I believe was a coffee room and is talking to Nigel about her job and how much she just is dissatisfied with it and just can't get over the fact that she's not being rewarded for her hard work. And so Nigel immediately just tells her, well, then you should quit. And Andrea is very taken back by that because she was just expecting Nigel to be kind of soft with her and expect him to understand. But Nigel just gives her a wake-up call essentially and says, look, like you're in a very high demand job and anyone would kill to have this position you have. So you need to realize that and not just basically sit around and whine about everything. So this talk with Nigel helps her a lot. And she decides for them to go into what looks like the designer room. And they go in there, she picks out all these outfits and it basically just creates a whole new wardrobe and changes her attitude and is way more confident and just basically acts like she's been working there her whole life and knows what she's doing. So the first concept I applied was the loyalty aspect in the EVLN model. So the EVLN model stands for exit, voice, loyalty, and neglect. And these are 4 ways employers respond to any kind of dissatisfaction. So specifically with loyalty in the EVLN model, Loyalists are people who handle the dissatisfaction of the situation by either waiting for it to change or going to others to help them change, as described in the textbook on page 103. And this is applied to this scene when Andrea is getting frustrated with feeling like she can never do her job right and finally decides to go to Nigel and ask for help. She could have just waited around, but instead she decides to be proactive about it and goes to someone she works with to see what kind of help she can get. She's being loyal to Miranda and the company because she just decides not to quit right then and there. She still wants to stick it out and work for her in hopes that Nigel can help her change how she feels about her job. A recommendation I have for this is I feel like at the beginning of this job, whenever someone is applied or not applied, but whenever someone joins it, that whoever is essentially giving them the job, they should explain like, hey, if you're struggling, you should realize you have other coworkers that you can kind of rely on and go to for help, because I feel like if that's not established, then people are going to feel lost. And just as I explained earlier, that many past assistants just quit right then and there because they probably felt like they didn't have anyone to go to. So that's a recommendation for future instances. And the next concept I applied was the voice aspect in the EVLN model. And based on the textbook, having a voice is any attempt to change rather than escape from the dissatisfying situation, which is also found on page 103. So after Andrea goes to Nigel for help and complains about her job, Nigel essentially gives her a wake-up call about her job. Andrea decides she doesn't want to quit, and Nigel helps her give her a wardrobe makeover. So that scene is applied to this concept because, like I said, Andrea is deciding to be proactive and wants to change it and just doesn't want to sit around and just be dissatisfied with her job anymore. She wants to be happy with it and everything. So she comes up with this idea, and in the end, it ends up working out. And so I feel like a recommendation for future instances as well is to maybe someone could coordinate like a list of ways like, hey, if you're not happy with it, here's what you can do, or here's what you can do, kind of like a guideline for people in future instances, or for anyone who works there, like for Emily, for Andrea, for Nigel, like, hey, you're dissatisfied, maybe try doing this or that. Just different outlets that people can look to instead of feeling trapped like most people do when they're dissatisfied. And finally, the last aspect or the last concept I added to this was the locus of control. So based on the textbook, locus of control is defined as a person's general beliefs about the amount of control he or she has over personal life events. Those who have internal locus control believe events happen due to their personal characteristics, like how much motivation they have and their capability to do things, whereas other people might have external locus control that they believed fate is in charge of everything they do. And this is applied to this scene when Andrea takes matter into her own hands and decides to change the outcome of how she's feeling about her job. She has internal locus of control because she believes that she has control over her actions, and that is not determined by fate. Her deciding to change how she's feeling and change her wardrobe and change her attitude and her confidence is being proactive about it and having that internal locus of control that she can change the situation she is in and not just let fate handle anything that she's in. And so, like I said, she changes her attitude and she gains so much more confidence about doing her job right. And yeah, that's basically it.
Here's just like the our resources of where we got, which is the book and also just the movie that we found. And that is all. Thank you all. I'm gonna try to stop recording. Thank you all for listening.